What's up, YouTube? If you didn't know, we actually time traveled back to 2017 today and decided to run through some about as old school Rix's Shadow as you can get. You can get a little bit farther. We could be running like Serum Visions, but I could only handle so much spice in one sitting. So, if you didn't play Grix's Shadow back in the day, this is a little bit what your stock list would look like the 4 Wraith, 4 Stub, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Shadow, 4 Thought Scour, 4 Gurmag Angler. Bunch of these core cards is just 4 ofs, and complement them with some Temur Battle Rages, Dismembers, a Lightning Bolt, Snapcaster Mage, Drowning Locks, like the newest thing out of this list. But when I say I did not put much thought into the list at all, I absolutely mean it. Like, it's just cards I felt like casting, threw them together. So if you ask a bunch of questions about like why this over this, what about this, what about Murktide over Gurmag, what about Counterspell over Drown, don't expect a good response because there is no thought put in there. I just took a list from like 2017 and ported it over. Uh, First off, if you're saying or asking like why Murktide over Gurmag Angler, because Gurmag exiles whatever the heck it wants to. When most of your starts are something like Bobble Yourself, Cycle a Wraith, Fetch Shock Thoughtseize, turn 2, Fetch Shock, Scour Yourself Gurmag, you don't know how big this Gurmag is going to be, and you don't want to be relying on like having to exile specific things or not to power out a second Gurmag Angler. In the sideboard, we got a few more updated spots. Played a counter spell just to complement the counters in the main, along with a couple Flusterstorm for the unfair stuff. 2 copies of Dress Down, 2 Turok, because Turok's been fantastic against the 4 color pals. An Alpine Moon, a Royal Scions, and a K Command. Throwbacks if there ever were some. Couple copies of Terminate, 2 Unlicensed Hearse, and a Stone of Eric that I'm still wanting to try out. I've put it in my sideboard like 4 times now, and I don't think I've seen it yet. But the idea is against like the Cat Oven decks, against Scam, you can have a turn 1 stone, and when like that Cauldron Familiar goes to the graveyard, or the Grief before it gets Undying, it just gets exiled instead. So kind of hoping that'll help slow down some of those crazy creature matchups. But anyway, let's go ahead and just like jump into the matches, show off. I have to stress yet again, because I guarantee there's going to be questions about it. There is so little thought put into this list that I can't explain it any other way. Like, if you come out asking why this over this, why that, what's the purpose of this card, there's not one. Just sit back and enjoy the Gurmag Anglers in 2023. Don't try to question it too much. If you question it, you're going to be disappointed with the answers because they're non-existent. All right, match number 1. We win the die roll. Great start. Pretty good opening hand. We've got Wraith, Inquisition, a couple Street Wraith, or a couple of Thought Scours. So we can fill up our graveyard pretty quickly. I could Inquisition on turn 1, but I'm more interested in hitting this second land. So I really want to like scour myself here, and if I don't hit it, probably untap, scour myself again. But we do find the land. So we can Inquisition, big ol' swing and a miss. Ah. But I will say, there's a reason that a lot of the current Shadow lists have just like cut Inquisition. Against the Cascade decks, you can often completely whiff, like in this case. So you do have to be very, very careful about playing it. And against like the Elemental decks, it misses the ring now. So probably a card you're pretty safe having out of your deck. So get down to Gurmag Angler. Opponent's going to cycle for a couple more lands. We know they have a Grief and a Street Wraith, so we're probably getting Grief this turn. Thankfully, the second Stubborn Denial is going to go a long way in terms of keeping us alive, at least momentarily. So Grief, follow up with a Shardless Agent to get this Stubborn Denial out of hand. Go ahead and be mana efficient and kill off the Shardless. So our Thought Scours did bin over both copies of Snapcaster Mage. So no Snap Stub, which means we've got to find another copy of Stub naturally or Drown in the Loch. Opponent's got a Curator, Waker Waves, and a Forest, and they're drawing another Curator off the top. I really thought they were just going to like hard cast a Curator here, but I can understand that being like the play to not lose line instead of the play to win. Like they need to find a Cascade spell. Waker dishes over Botanical Sanctum, another Curators. They've had like 5 looks at another Cascader, and yeah, not really surprised they find it. Now, we do have a copy of Lightning Bolt in the deck, so I am playing this out. Both Snapcasters targeting Thought Scours. I want to let the Grief resolve, but before the Shardless Agent does, in case they have a land for a food token, I'm going to fire off these Thought Scours. Try to hit the Lightning Bolt, which we do not. So on to game 2. If you did play this Shadow variant back in the day, you know that it does have a very, very high propensity to flood, which is kind of rough. All right, so Inquisition on the play. Takes Violent Outburst. Our opponent does have Grief here. Grief Ditch a Grief. So we know Street Wraith is gone. They've had 2 more looks at another Cascade spell so far. This is the 3rd look. Thought Scour ourselves, try to find a Stubborn Denial, Fatal Push, something. And 4th look is a hit. So somewhere in those 4 draws, they found another Cascade spell. Little unfortunate for us. Scoop it up there because we're dead in 2 turns to the attacks. And even if we top deck a threat, we can't block either of them. So really rough that 2017 Shadow does not take down 2023 Living End. But hey, what are you going to do? All right, so we've got Windswept Heath and a Breeding Pool. I'm kind of thinking it's another Living End deck because of this Breeding Pool, but I don't actually know, so I don't want to just tap out for the Gurmag Angler and have my opponent go like cycle, untap, Cascade spell. So I'm just going to flash in Snapcaster to get like my beat down on. I was so confused right here because I was like, why are they Violent Outbursting? Like, they're going to miss having any creatures. Like, you're going to cast it, like, hold priority and cycle 4 Street Wraiths? No, it's just Rhinos. I'm not going to lie. I forgot this was a deck. That's how long it's been since I've seen it in the queues. Like, could not tell you the last time I actually ran into a Rhinos opponent. But we do get down a Gurmag and a Shadow. So, opponent makes this attack. I have the ability to block a Rhino, dismember the other Rhino, grow my Shadow past the first one, and go from there. But I kind of want to just take this hit and save my Dismember, hold up the Stubborn Denial in case they have another Cascade spell, which they do here. So because I was patient, I get to counterspell that, untap. Um, Sequencing here. I can dismember the Shardless Agent and attack through. The issue is if I dismember the Shardless Agent and they have Force of Negation, then I can't attack and I've lost 2 life. Uh, so if I just go for the Temur Battle Rage, it's the same result if my spell resolves. It's me winning the game. But if it doesn't, if they have the Force Negation, then I can just not attack, not lose the 2 life, and be in a much better position. So that's why we go for the Battle Rage instead of the Dismember. All right. Sideboarding against the Rhinos deck. Kind of like we do with the current builds. We're just boarding out like Bolt and Dismembers and maybe a Fatal Push or something, bringing in Fluster Storms. I'm not running an Engineered Explosives in this build. Again, not really a lot of reason behind it. We'll talk about potential changes at the end of the video. So opponents can ice down our land here. That is fine. Saving this fetch in case I need to fetch up a basic around Blood Moon. Now that I've found the basic island, I know that I can fetch up basic swamp with the Polluted Delta. So opponent had the Shardless Agent and chose not to cast it. Very interesting choice. Put a Fury on the stack. So I know their hand perfectly is Force Negation, Fire and Ice Fury. Going to take a hit off this one so that we can get down a couple shadows. Go for Ice. Oh. I'm going to stub this just to like try to get cards out of their hand. I'm not super worried about this second Fury. I'm more worried about them having like more follow-ups. Which I could block the Fury, fetch twice, eat the Fury, and then they get to cast a new one and kill my existing Shadow. I think I like just taking that hit a little bit more. I'm dead to like another Fire, but if they don't have a Fire, I give myself a chance to untap in a really good position. Fortunately, my opponent, for whatever reason, fetches down to 12 and then passes. So I just have 2 lethal shadows, and I don't know what their last card was, but it was clearly not an ice. Who knows? Anyway, on to match 3. So it's Susurrus. Player I used to watch stream a ton. Big time, like Prison Tron player and stuff like that. So when I Inquisition on turn 1 and they scoop the game, I'm thinking it's probably got to be something pretty unfair. So as far as sideboarding, I kept it fairly minimal. But then they start off Land Cookbook game 2. So I kind of assume like I'm probably in some trouble because I boarded for unfair. They're showing me fair. I do have like turn 2 Gurmag Angler and a Battle Rage eventually, but it's probably not good enough against the turn 2 Goryo's Vengeance and Emrakul hand. So there's that. Regardless, we get to go to game 3. Now that I have a better idea of what I'm up against, I know I can side out like these fatal pushes. I can side out the dismembers. I trimmed on a Gurmag Angler and a Snapcaster, mainly because if it's an Asmo deck, I don't want to get flooded on Gurmag Anglers because they're going to be able to deal with one pretty well. And then trimmed on a Snapcaster because as good as they are, they're a little slow in this kind of matchup. So I just like don't want them in my opening hand. Thoughtseize on 1, we get a cookbook. They do have an epicure with a saga, so they can get another cookbook fairly easily. So hold up counterspell, try to hit this Wishclaw talisman. Nice. If we had another land, I would go for Scour myself, get Gurmag Angler down, and then next turn, like K command, shoot the Wishclaw, shoot the Epicure, something like that. But because I didn't have the land and I didn't know I was going to be able to K command next turn, I'd rather just like keep the Wishclaw off the board. And here we get one of the most joyful things in all of Modern's history. It's killing 2 creatures with a Kolaghan's command. Very, very popular against old affinity decks, against infect, stuff like that. So love to see it get a little bit of use here. All right. So Thoughtseize strips away the Vengeance target. We know they have 2 lands currently. Flip away a Verdant Catacombs. Draw a Black Cleave Cliffs and play that. So we know one of their cards in hand is still this Blood Crypt. Very likely the Flusterstorm's not going to do much for us, but we got to try. Luckily, we do get there. I'm sure people who have watched the stream have heard my story before about getting turn 1 by Grishelbrand in a modern PPTQ with a list like this. And I do think that old school Grixis Shadow is like one of the best decks imaginable, like unfair graveyard shenanigan matchups, except for Dredge, not Dredge. The other unfair graveyard stuff, like reanimation style strategies. All right, so Thoughtseize sees Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, Terminate. We are definitely taking the Terminate because it's the only thing that answers the Gurmag Angler at the moment, which we thankfully find a second land to be able to get down. Now, we are hoping and praying that we can ride this Gurmag Angler to victory. I was really expecting a Blood Moon there, and I was going to have to like double Battle Rage my opponent. But fortunately, it is not a Blood Moon, and we get to strip away this ring. Like, finding the stubs is great. We had the Thoughtseize all along, so we knew we'd be able to take the ring before it came down. But now we've lost our Stubborn Denial. We're going to have to hope that these Battle Rages get in a bit of work. Let's start by going to combat, see if they want to. Yeah, so pretty heads up play by my opponent to like Lightning Bolt my Gurmag Angler before they declare blocks, because if the bolt doesn't resolve, then you just don't block it. But lucky for us, we have this busted Fire Design 2023 Magic card, Temur Battle Rage, that just says like, oh, you've got a lightning bolt. That's cool. Gurmag Angler don't care. So thanks, Watsy, for finally printing something busted for Death Shadow. But yeah, drop down a couple shadows and make pretty quick work out of a flipped Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Game 2, pretty sketchy hand, especially against a Ragavan. Even with 2017 cards, we can't escape the 2023 fate of running into multiple mulligans when you have like an unkeepable 7 into a sketchy 6. But if Ragavan behaves a little bit, then maybe we can just find another land and get to like drop down Gurmag Angler, hold up Stubborn Denial. Bowmaster in response to the Thought Scours. Pretty fun. Thankfully, a 2-1 Ragavan, a 1-1 Orcish Bowmaster, and a 2-2 Army token don't really do a great job of standing in the way of just a 5-5 Murktide or 5-5 Gurmag Angler. We're not on Murktide. Murktide's terrible. We play real cards here. Get to stub a Terminate. Heck yeah. So we're just gonna fire off another Gurmag or fire off another Thought Scour. I probably should have used the steam vents here. In fact, there's like no reason whatsoever to use the watery grave. That should 100% have been the steam vents. If I drew a fetch land, I don't think I'm playing the second Gurmag Angler anyway, because I kind of want to keep holding up Stubborn Adal in case they have a ring. Because we saw the ring game 1, so we know it's in the deck. I'll oh, this Fable. Nope. Thought this was the turn they played the ring. Nope. More Stubborn Adals. As anybody who plays a bunch of Death Shadow will tell you, you draw enough Stubborn Denials and the game becomes easy. So they attack with the army. I don't know why they didn't attack with the Ragavan. That seems like pretty awkward. But we're just going to jam threats here because our opponent's got this. Oh, that's why I didn't. That's why I thought Scoured off the Watery Grave. It's because they have an Urborg out. So the Steam Vents taps for black anyway. That's why. So it was not 100% correct to Thought Scour off the Steam Vents. It was actually 100% incorrect. Good on us for obviously recognizing that, like, 5 minutes after I'm claiming my lines are horrible. All right, so this is match number 5. We are sitting at 3-1, but we come up against Mono Black. I hate this deck so incredibly much. We don't really have much going on. Oh, I'm just gonna force the issue, get down Shadow, hope they don't have an answer for it. I could wait, but like Drown in the Lock's not countering anything past a Fatal Push. And if they have a second one, I'm kind of dead in the water. So I'm just trying to force the issue here. We get into sideboarding where we get a lot of the dead cards out of the deck. The Fatal Pushes, Dismembers, Bolt. I trimmed a Battle Rage because between like March of Wretched Sorrow, Fatal Push, Shieldred's Edict, like they have a lot of ways of answering. Let's yeah, but don't know why that screen decided to pop up. So let's back up a little bit. I was saying they have a lot of ways of answering one of our threats at instant speed. But we're just trying to be aggressive and proactive. So we get to Thoughtseize away a Fatal Push. We have the potential to turn to a Shadow. Just dropping it down to where it's big enough to dodge March and hope they don't draw a Fatal Push right away. Because if we get to untap with a Shadow like so and have access to Counterspell, then maybe we can kind of like tempo the game out a little bit. When it goes for the Wretched Sorrow, or goes for the Field of Ruin second main phase. I decide, like, I know I'm getting the basic island there and firing off one Thought Scour. Since they didn't respond with a removal spell, I decided to just go ahead and fire off the second Thought Scour, just to try to refuel my hand a little bit. Get to catch them lacking with a ring. So, nice on the game 3. No threat. Can't keep a no threat hand on the play or on the draw, especially a hand with like no good way of finding a threat. You can kind of get away with a no threat hand that has a bunch of street wraiths and baubles and stuff, but you can't get away with a no threat hand that doesn't have anything going for it. So we do see Field of Ruin come down. Saw them Night's Whisper last turn. They can't Damnation this turn, so I figure like, hey, if you kill one of my threats, that sucks, but at least I know I'm gonna have a second threat around. And so, like in this case, we get in a big attack. Do not want my opponent resolving a ring. We know the Shadow's dead to a Filigree Silex, but as we see, you find enough copies of Stubborn Denial, and you're gonna have a good chance of winning the game, especially when your opponent has to tap out for a Bloodchief's Thirst. Like that's just prime 2017 GDS territory right there. Let me get down a threat. Turn 2, protect the queen with stubs and drowns, whatever the case may be. So let's talk about the list after the league. And this is the point where there might be some opinions on some of the cards, and maybe you can take it with you and make some changes on your own time. So first off would be the threat base. Snapcaster Mage, as much as I love the card, I would probably not run right now. With the one ring everywhere, you're going to have endurances left and right. You're going to have, what's it called? Just like grave hate all over the place. So I'd be pretty skeptical about that. I don't even think it did anything the entire league. So it's not like you're missing a ton. Otherwise, Gurmag Angler, I wish was a better threat. Like it's solid. It dodges some removal, and it's going to completely depend on how popular like the new Grixis list is with Bowmaster and Underworld Breach, because that's an Unholy Heat deck on the rise, and like how popular Murktide is. Murktide can answer Gurmag pretty well. Temur Battle Rage can be a liability at times. So honestly, your flex spots are like the 2 Inquisitions I would cut entirely. If you really want a 5th or 6th hand disruption spell, probably Duress is like your best option. I know it doesn't hit much out of Living End outside of like Force Negation, but that can still be a good hit. But it does hit things like the Ring. As far as threats go, I would probably do something like, I really wonder if you could get away with going to an 18th land, putting in like 3 copies of Kroxa, and finding something else to pair with Shadow, whether that's like Shadow of Mortality or just some other threat that didn't like require the graveyard if you were going heavy on Kroxa. That could be an option. The Lightning Bolt's probably pretty unnecessary. You could just run a Bloodchief's Thirst or like any other black removal spell there. The Temur Battle Rages, I feel like you got to keep the Battle Rage for nostalgia, but it's not an end of the world thing if you decide to cut them. You could just cut the Battle Rages, go up a couple more Drowns, cut the Bolt, go heavy on Kroxa, whatever the case may be. In the sideboard, the counterspell was fairly good. The Dress Downs are fine. Flustered Storm's fine. Turok. Turok's probably a little iffy in this build because hitting 4 lands is going to be very, very inconsistent. Royal Scions and K Command, I think, are both like significantly past their prime. You probably just need to cut those and go with something you think is going to interact a little better. maybe engineered explosives in one of those spots if you're expecting a bunch of hammer time or rhinos or something like that. The unlicensed hearses and the stone. Hearse, I think, is pretty good right now. Stone, I've still yet to actually cast the card, so I couldn't tell you if it's good or not. But I think what's going to happen with a lot of people making suggestions on the deck is they're going to start just turning this into Demir. Like, oh, cut the battle rages for more drowns and cut the Gurmag anglers for Murktides and stuff like that. At which point, just play Demir. Like, you get access to the 4 counter spell, the 3 or 4 stubborn denial. There's really not a reason to like keep playing this list when you have an option to that's more tailored to like Murktide. This list is tailored to Gurmag Angler. It's tailored to trying to get Gurmag on the board turn 2 as often as possible. And Murktide cannot, I gotta like shout it for the people in the back. Murktide cannot replace Gurmag Angler at doing that job, at getting on the board turn 2 as a ferocious threat and saying you've got to have an answer like right now. Gurmag Angler or Murktide's going to come down as a 3/3 or a 4/4 so often. It's not worth it. Don't 1-for-1 trade out your Gurmags for Murktides if your goal is to play like one of these turbo angler builds. If you're going to play Murktide, play cards that are good with Murktide. Consider fantastic with Murktide, not fantastic with Gurmag Angler, because you need just like the massive cards that Thought Scour gives you to put in the yard. And I'm sure people are going to say, oh, just put in Murktide and keep the Bobble. Bobble, also not great with Murktide, fantastic with Gurmag Angler. So keep those things in mind if you're deciding you want to like revisit 2017 GDS in 2023. But other than that, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video and some of the commentary. As always, if you are, feel free to drop a subscription on YouTube. Doesn't cost you anything, just lets you know whenever the new videos like this go live. Otherwise, have a link to the deck list down below, as well as a link to the Twitter in case you want to know whenever streams are going live. That's the first place it gets updated. Link to the Twitch stream down below. So if you want to catch a live stream of this or other shadow builds or non-shadow decks, that'll be there. And a link to the Control Freak Discord. Come say hey, come ask about changes to the list, what my thoughts are, what everybody else's thoughts are. Happy to have you there. Other than that, I hope you all have an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.